Hello again, my name is Shadrach. I'm the founder of VetConnect and a 2023 Mandela Washington Fellow at Purdue University. So for this series, we'll talk about a series of essay questions that you're going to have to respond to. So from your introductions, there are so many sections, I think about 8 or 9 sections through your applications, from your introduction to filling your bio data, uploading documents, talking about your work experience, talking about your volunteer experience, uploading certifications, I think references, then the component of your essay. So here, it's where you bring everything together, right? So there are about 6 essay questions we answered. What I advise at this stage is you have to own your story and talk about it. Because remember that whoever is going to be reading these applications has read thousands and thousands. So sometimes it can be really easy picking through what someone says that doesn't add up. And the reason you have a lot of these questions to answer is that if at any point your story is not consistent, it's going to be able to show up one way or the other. So you want to be able to have a very clear story, and that's why consistency at this point is very important. So my first question then was to provide an overview of your professional accomplishment from the past year, as well as your long-term goals and aspirations. So this is you talking about your past, coming back to talk about what you're doing in the present and how it connects back to the future. And you're going to do this with 250 words. The whole idea is it can be tricky if you've done a lot of things, because you would wonder which one should you take out, which one should you keep in. This is where you have to go back to my previous video to remember I said you have to weigh all 3 categories. Which one comes out strongest for you? That's the one you're going to be talking about. So you cannot be applying other business track and talking about how you went and helped address the challenge of lack of water in your community. That's a civic thing, right? So you need to stick to your story that aligns with your selected category of whatever track you're going to apply on that. So like I said, this question goes back to your past, comes back to the present, and connects to what you want to be able to do in the future under 250 words. So for me, I talked about who I am, so you give an introduction. This is not to talk about how the fact that I'm from Benue State or like I'm the first child of my father. No, I'm going to talk about what I am professionally, what I'm doing. So I talked about the fact that I'm a veterinarian by profession. I talked about the work I'm doing. I'm talking about the fact, and when you're talking about these things, numbers are very critical. So giving that idea, remember it's about my professional accomplishments. So when it comes to accomplishment, you want to tie them to, it has to be qualitative and quantitative. Numbers matter, right? Then you connect it back to the areas that you say you're making impact in. Then what is now happening in the present, and then to the future. This is what you've done. How does the future look for you? Remember, the track has to be very consistent. I don't want to stay too long on this. I'll go down to the next question, which was about, based on your understanding of your preferred tracks, what skills and knowledge do you hope to gain from the fellowship and that you will not be able to develop through other opportunities? How will you apply these skills to advance work in your community in the next 3 to 5 years? So closely related to the first question is what will you get out of the fellowship that you probably will not be able to get elsewhere? Now, it's also tricky, because the truth of the matter is that there are several other opportunities that you could probably get this kind of exposure from. So it's not a comparison thing. It's about how you can now connect the objectives of the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which is looking out for young leaders in these 3 categories of tracks who are making impact and they are willing to invest in them so that they can come back to their communities and amplify impact. How do you align with that? So this is where you now identify those critical points which will be useful in helping you align very clearly on the value you're going to get from the fellowship. Remember, you're going to be in the university. You don't get to choose that. The ones that will attach you based on your chosen track, but you must be clear. So I'll give an idea. So in my case, I mentioned the fact that I, as a social entrepreneur and change agent, blah blah blah, the work I do, and then this is how I feel going through this fellowship would speak very strongly to my own experience. So that's something I was very, very clear in identifying. And you don't want to be philosophical at this point. have very, very clear-cut targets. That is very, very important. You need to have very, very clear-cut targets so that you don't say bogus things that you cannot easily quantify. The next question was on Nelson Mandela. You know, he's very critical as far as the Mandela Washington Fellowship goes. So it was about the fact that a fundamental concern for others in our individual and community lives would go a long way in making the world a better place, right? So what changes or other improvements do you hope to implement in the community you engage in? So this is a question that seeks to get an idea around your work as a community leader. The fellowship is highly community based. It's not that hyperbole of the kind of world you want to build. It's what you're doing now. How are you doing it? How are you improving on it? Those are the kind of things that this fellowship is trying to get out of it. Because remember, you have said a lot of things before you got to this point. So they just want to be able to bring out to you and explaining those moments. So here too, you want to give an idea of what you're already doing. So here I went back to talk about some of the impacts I'm making in my community as a digital innovation lead in Mind the Gap. I talked briefly around that. I talked about the work I do in my community, in my profession as a veterinary doctor, what I'm doing in Vet Connect, and how going through this experience will help mold or even amplify that experience. Then I go down to the fourth question, and this question talked about diversity. So it says the fellowship values diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? What does these values mean to you? So I went on in answering this question, I went back to one experience I had in implementing a program when I was serving back in Gombe State. I talked about a very unique experience, and everything picked on this point in terms of diversity, inclusion, and the impact it had. That is what I did with that question, and I feel it was one of the easiest I was able to answer. Then the next one was in terms of unforeseen circumstances, COVID-19, the challenges that came with it, and how I was able to demonstrate resilience through that whole challenge. So there again, I was able to talk about some of the work I've done with the Nigerian Youth SDGs Network, and how all of this feeds into an overall objective of going through challenges with a very clear-cut mindset. So all of these questions, like I said, it's an opportunity for you to share what you've already written down, to say that this is what you have done, and at all times, rule of thumb, you must quantify the work you're doing. It's very, very important. That's how someone can be able to paint a mental picture of the impact of the work you're doing. Then this was another one I found very exciting. It was in terms of peaceful resolution. So it was still on the story of Mandela. So I went on to share about the work I'm doing in terms of not the work I'm doing. I talked about something I did in terms of resolving conflict between two of my proteges. It's a long story, so I won't share it now, but I reckon it's one of those things that were highlighted during my interview, for instance. So you just want to be able to, at every question that you ask, is an opportunity for you to share a unique perspective or an experience that you had. Something else I will talk about quickly is the professional development experience. So it's an optional thing. I'll do a separate video for PDE. So yeah.